Luke Franklin returns to Clearwater Pines, hoping for peace, but the HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance gives him a weird feeling. The sign had never been that shiny. When he'd visited last Christmas, the old metal plate had been tilted slightly, faded by decades of Florida sun. Now it stood rigid and proud, bolted to a new post, painted in rich navy blue with gold lettering. Under oversight of Chairwoman K. Blakely, it proclaimed, as if the neighborhood had suddenly become a gated subdivision under military command. Luke slowed his rental car as he passed it, raising an eyebrow. The fall air was unseasonably crisp for October, and the scent of pumpkin spice drifted faintly from somewhere nearby. He turned onto Maple Crest Lane, where his father's house stood, third on the left, white fence, sagging porch swing, and the smell of old leather and black coffee forever etched into the air. Pulling up to the curb, Luke barely had time to turn off the engine before Marla came hobbling down her front steps with a watering can in hand. "Well, if it isn't Luke Franklin," she said with a raspy warmth. "Back in town?" "Just for a while," he smiled, stepping out. "Taking a break from the city?" "Good," she nodded, then lowered her voice. "Watch out for Karen. She's active lately." He chuckled, not sure if she was joking, but the concern in her eyes suggested otherwise. The front yard of his father's home looked nearly identical to how it had always been. The mailbox still leaned a little to the right, the wind chimes still sang off-key, and the flowerbeds hadn't seen a proper trim in weeks. Luke felt comfort in the imperfection. Mr. Harold Franklin opened the front door before Luke could knock. Dressed in a pressed collared shirt and slacks, his father looked less like a retiree and more like a quietly retired colonel waiting for something to fix. "Come in," he said, simply. Inside, nothing had changed. The same leather chair by the window. The bookshelf stacked with law journals, U.S. Code annotated editions, and a curious framed certificate in Latin hung above the fireplace. Luke dropped his bag, took in the familiar scent of cedarwood and coffee grounds, and let his shoulders ease for the first time in weeks. "You still drinking the same stuff?" he asked. "Stronger now," his father replied. "Age makes caffeine less effective." They sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming between them. Luke glanced out the window at a community bulletin board posted at the corner. Even from here, he could see the red-bordered flyers pinned in neat rows. "What's going on with the HOA?" His father didn't look up from his cup. "Let her talk." Luke frowned. "Her who?" Mr. Franklin only offered a thin smile. That afternoon, Luke wandered through the neighborhood to stretch his legs. A few residents waved from their porches. Children chased leaves in driveways, dogs barked from behind fences, and the whole scene might have been serene if not for the constant presence of flyers, notices, and laminated bulletins. One at the mailbox read, "Trash bins must be returned within 12 minutes of pickup." Another declared, "Lawn height not to exceed 3 inches." Every corner had something posted, stamped with an official-looking logo shaped like a magnolia blossom wrapped in laurel. He passed a row of pumpkins lining the walkway to the community clubhouse. Each one was numbered. A sign read, "Fall Aesthetic Assessment underway, do your part." It felt more like prep for an HOA inspection than a seasonal celebration. He rubbed his jaw. Something about all this didn't sit right. Back at the house, he parked his car just behind the sidewalk. It wasn't until he stepped inside that he saw the white envelope wedged under the wiper blade. He opened it. A pre-filled citation inside stated, "Violation, vehicle encroaching municipal walking space, 2 inches." Luke blinked. "Is this real?" Mr. Franklin looked up from his crossword. "Let her play her part." Luke stepped out again, scanning the street. 2 elderly men were mowing adjacent lawns in perfect synchronization. Another woman was measuring the distance between her recycling bin and the edge of her garage with a yellow tape. Then came the voice. "You've already broken 2 ordinances." Luke is summoned to an introductory compliance meeting at Karen's garage, now a self-declared HOA HQ. The invitation came in the form of a pale yellow slip, tucked beneath the welcome mat. Printed in Comic Sans, it read, "Mandatory orientation for new residents, Community Harmony Session, Group B, followed by a hand-drawn map of Karen's driveway and 3 glitter stars around the words HOA HQ, by appointment only. Luke tilted his head, flipping the slip over. There was a small HOA seal stamped in red. At closer inspection, it appeared to be a rubber stamp featuring a cat in a laurel wreath. He showed it to his father over breakfast. Mr. Franklin didn't look up from the paper. Did you ever have to salute a seal like that? I've seen real ones that meant less, his father said, folding the corner neatly. At precisely 3 p.m., Luke walked across the street. Karen's garage door was already open, but a nylon ribbon stretched across the threshold. A laminated sign above it read, "Welcome to the Compliance Pavilion." Behind it stood Karen Blakely, arms folded, lips pursed, dressed in khaki slacks and a polo embroidered with the words Neighborhood Authority. Her blonde bob was immaculately curled, though the Florida humidity was beginning to win. A podium stood just behind her, clearly homemade, likely from repurposed kitchen cabinets. Behind it, folding tables were stacked with binders, each labeled in calligraphy, violation records, litter, sidewalk infractions, unauthorized wind chimes. A tiny battery-powered fan sat beside a gold-plated bell labeled "Order in Session." "You're late," Karen said, though Luke was exactly on time. He glanced at his watch. "Am I?" She ignored the question and gestured to a lone plastic chair set before the podium. Behind it, a few neighbors sat in mismatched folding chairs, looking as if they had wandered into a PTA meeting from another dimension. None of them made eye contact. Jacob, Karen's teenage son, hovered near the garage's side wall, phone in hand but screen dark. His hood was up despite the heat, and he avoided looking at either of them. Karen cleared her throat and tapped a clipboard. Today's session will cover the Community Expectations Index, Tiered Fine Protocol, and a brief overview of behavioral harmonization guidelines. Luke sat carefully. That's a lot of syllables. Karen didn't smile. Clarity ensures compliance. She launched into a presentation that sounded half corporate training, half boot camp orientation. She explained the color uniformity code, no more than 3 paint tones per house exterior, the garden planting grid, vegetables in backyards only, flowers approved in front zones, and the unofficial behavioral alert system, not yet formalized, but being tested. At one point, she brandished a laminated flowchart that began with nonconformity observed and ended with disciplinary review committee. Luke noticed the arrows looped back on themselves 3 times. "And of course," she said, flipping the chart over, "we believe in proactive correction. That's why we've implemented Tier 1 through 5 violation notices, starting with verbal advisories and escalating to decorative flag restrictions." Luke raised an eyebrow. "You're restricting flags?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "Only when they interfere with neighborhood feng shui." He glanced at Jacob, who was now biting his lip to suppress either laughter or dread. "Hard to tell." Karen pulled out a pink folder and opened it with flair. "Now, as a new resident, technically, your initial infractions have been documented. I'm offering you the option to waive your first-tier fines with a written acknowledgement of our expectations." Luke leaned back. "And if I decline?" She blinked. "Then you remain out of alignment with community values. I think I'll need some time to read over the policies. They're available in the binder." She turned, retrieved a heavy volume from the table, and slammed it on the podium with both hands. "Internal HOA Enforcement Standards," the label read. It was 3 inches thick and smelled of toner. Luke flipped it open. The first 50 pages were blank. The next 10 were a mix of Google screenshots, vaguely cropped portions of actual county documents, and a section labeled Pending Legalese. One page was filled with a single sentence: "We reserve the right to reserve all rights." He looked up. "This is your standard?" Karen's nostrils flared. "It's evolving." "I'm not signing anything today," Luke said, standing. Behind him, a neighbor silently applauded with one hand. Karen's voice sharpened. "Some people think they're above the HOA, but nobody is above the IRS. Mr. Franklin opens a letter, a formal IRS audit notice addressed to him, prompted by an anonymous tip. The envelope was plain. No logos, no flair, just the soft off-white of something no one ever wanted to receive. It had been slipped between a utility bill and a local grocery ad in the mailbox, almost like it had wandered in by accident. But the bold black return address in the upper left corner made it clear: Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. Mr. Franklin stood by the kitchen counter, steady hands slicing open the seal with a letter opener that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Luke watched from the table, spoon halfway to his mouth, a bite of oatmeal forgotten. His father unfolded the paper with a methodical calm, scanned the top few lines, then set it flat beside his coffee. Audited, he said simply. Luke lowered his spoon. For what? Doesn't say. Standard phrasing. Likely taxes for the last 3 years. Possibly more. He leaned in. Seriously? That doesn't just happen. They don't randomly pick you. Someone triggered it. Mr. Franklin gave a half nod, poured more coffee. Anonymous tip, apparently. Luke blinked, putting it together faster than he wanted to admit. Karen's words from yesterday echoed in his mind, crisp, smug, and deliberate. Nobody is above the IRS. She hadn't been bluffing. This was her move. I can't believe she actually filed something federal, Luke muttered. Over sidewalk violations? She's escalating, his father said, sitting down. Which means she's either more reckless than we thought, or she believes she has control. Luke pushed his bowl aside. What are you going to do? Mr. Franklin took a measured sip. Nothing. For now. That's it? Luke's voice sharpened. You're just going to let her come after you with tax codes and fake ordinances? She wants a reaction. Best to let her get comfortable first. Luke exhaled, frustrated. Okay, seriously. I've asked twice now, what exactly did you do before retirement? There was a pause. Mr. Franklin set his mug down with a soft clink. I was the head of county regulatory oversight, he said. Most of my work focused on infrastructure permits, building code enforcement, and internal auditing for municipal organizations, including homeowner associations. Luke stared at him. So, you audited HOAs for a living? Yes. And you moved here to retire? Peacefully. Luke leaned back, running both hands through his hair. You do realize this is like some kind of HOA Cold War, and you're just sitting here sipping coffee. Because the more she does, Mr. Franklin said, folding the audit notice neatly, the easier it is to document. Luke didn't know what to say to that. Outside, a bird chirped from somewhere near the porch. The soft rustle of the wind carried the scent of warm leaves and distant cinnamon. A quiet street. A calm house. And a woman across the way slowly unraveling beneath a curtain of made-up authority. Luke stepped outside, needing air. The makeshift desk he'd set up near the porch swing was still scattered with notes from yesterday, flyers, copies of her warning letters, even a blurry photo of the HOA seal. He gathered them, sorting by category like a student preparing for a presentation he hadn't meant to give. Across the street, Karen stood by her mailbox, sunglasses on despite the shade, tapping something into her phone. When she looked up and saw Luke watching, she smiled, slow and satisfied, and raised an eyebrow as if to say checkmate. Luke didn't return the smile. He walked back inside, holding the audit letter in one hand and a flyer in the other. So, he said to his father, we're collecting now. We're always collecting, Mr. Franklin replied. That evening, just before dusk, another envelope appeared on their doorstep, no postage, no sender, just slid beneath the welcome mat like an errand completed. Luke picked it up. Bold red ink scrawled across the front in near-perfect cursive, non-cooperation will be noted for escalation. Luke investigates the legitimacy of the HOA, and discovers there's no registered charter. The county clerk's office smelled like old air conditioning and the ghost of toner ink. Rows of file cabinets lined one wall, though most of the work now happened behind humming screens. Luke sat across from a woman in a pale blue cardigan named Janet who typed with one finger and spoke in slow syllables, not because she thought he was slow, but because she had nothing to rush for. You said the name was what again, she asked, peering over her glasses. Clearwater Pines Homeowners Association, Luke replied, trying to keep his voice even. Or just Clearwater Pines HOA. Anything filed under that name in the last 10 years? Janet nodded and clicked through a few screens. The silence stretched long enough for Luke to count the blinking lights on her printer. Finally, she frowned. There's no active or inactive entity by that name. No charter, no articles of incorporation, no board filings. You sure they're operating legally? Luke smiled thinly. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She turned the screen toward him. See? You're welcome to file a formal inquiry. But this looks like something made up in a garage. Luke exhaled, thanking her. As he left, the heavy doors swung shut behind him with a soft thud, like a book closing on a lie. He stopped at the Porchlight Cafe on Main Street, a quiet little spot with cinnamon scones and the kind of regulars who drank coffee from ceramic mugs and refilled their own. Marla was already there, seated near the window, a canvas tote bag at her feet stuffed with yellowed paper folders. 2 other neighbors joined them, a man named Darren, who owned 3 rescue dogs and a weathered baseball cap, and Teresa, who walked with a cane but carried herself like she'd once been the town's fiercest PDA president. I brought the old neighborhood newsletters, Marla said, rifling through the bag. From back when we actually had block parties. Luke spread out the stack. Most of the newsletters were dated before Karen moved in. None mentioned any vote to establish an HOA. One flyer from 2004 referred to voluntary dues for playground cleanup, but even that was hand-signed by individual neighbors. Has anyone here actually seen a legal HOA charter? He asked. Teresa shook her head. Karen just started printing flyers one day. She stapled a citation to my rose bush, Darren muttered. For visual disruption. Luke tapped his phone. There's no HOA on file with the county. It legally doesn't exist. She's made it all up. A hush settled around the table. Marla sipped her tea. Teresa leaned forward. Then what do we do? Luke looked at them, the weight of a question that had no easy answer pressing against his ribs. We start by telling the truth. That night, he sat at his porch desk, laptop open, phone recording. He laid out a copy of Karen's so-called bylaws beside the official county template for legitimate HOA filings. The contrast was laughable. Karen's rules included mandatory known limits and fence paint approval. The county's template outlined voting quorums, budget disclosures, and bylaw amendment procedures. He hit record. This is what an actual HOA looks like, he said calmly, gesturing to the template. And this, he held up Karen's binder cover, is what someone prints when they think authority comes from their printer. He uploaded the video to a private neighborhood message board, one Marla had helped maintain for garage sale notices and casserole chains. Within minutes, comments began appearing. A few neighbors had clearly been waiting for someone to say it aloud. Then came Karen's response. The next morning, laminated signs appeared zip-tied to light poles and stapled to bulletin boards. New Ordinance 4/13, questioning authority is a violation. Beneath that, in smaller font, infractions will be recorded and escalated. Luke read one aloud, blinking. That's not even how ordinances work. Across the street, Karen stood in her driveway, arranging new binders into a plastic tote labeled Restricted Operations. She didn't look up. That evening, a notification pinged on Luke's phone. A reply to his video. The user was anonymous, but the message was short. You don't know what she's really doing. Karen is seen meeting a local contractor behind the clubhouse, whispering about compliance infrastructure. Luke wasn't trying to spy, not really. He'd stopped by the community center to take a photo of the new Neighborhood Values banner Karen had just hung, red script, gold trim, pinned crookedly above the bulletin board. But then he heard her voice. It was sharp, hushed, and not meant for public ears. Peeking around the back of the clubhouse, Luke caught sight of Karen standing next to a man in a faded HVAC uniform. She wore a windbreaker with the HOA seal stitched across the chest, the one she'd clearly ordered in bulk, and clutched a clipboard like a lifeline. The contractor nodded while Karen pointed toward the clubhouse roof and muttered something about compliance infrastructure and community optics. Luke snapped a picture from behind the bushes. Neither of them noticed. That evening, the HOA's Facebook group lit up with a new post from Karen. It was long, formal, and full of bolded words. Due to recent disrespect for order and safety, additional compliance measures are being installed. A modest HOA contribution of $45 per household is now requested, for upgraded surveillance and emergency broadcasting tools. Comments poured in. Some were confused, some angry, but many stayed silent. Luke sat at the kitchen table, a legal pad in front of him, the letter from the IRS folded beside a printed screenshot of Karen's post. His father stood by the stove, stirring something that smelled like tomato and quiet disappointment. "She's bluffing," Luke said, tapping the pen against his pad. "No vote, no meeting, just demands." "She's overreaching," Mr. Franklin replied. "When someone doubles down, they're usually hiding something." Luke opened his laptop, pulled up the HOA's PayPal account, the one Karen had listed in the post. He followed the digital trail, clicking through public notes, purchase logs, and screenshots. What he found wasn't shocking. It was insulting. Receipts tied to the HOA account included a bulk order of outdoor motion sensors, for custom banners, 2 sets of lawn signs, and a $368 invoice labeled Mobile Command Unit refit, which, as far as Luke could tell, meant repainting the old shed in Karen's backyard white and adding a lock. Several transactions were listed under Karen's personal email. Some items were sent directly to her home address. He printed everything. The next morning, a small manila envelope sat on the porch swing. It had no name, no return address, just "for Luke" written in all caps. Inside was a flash drive and a sticky note, "Check this. Not safe to send." Luke hesitated only a moment before plugging it into his laptop. The video was grainy, recorded from a side angle, maybe a phone set in a pocket or desk drawer. Karen stood in what looked like her garage, speaking to someone just off camera. "Look," she said, voice strained but determined, "they're not going to check. They don't even know what the bylaws are supposed to look like. All I have to do is collect, keep it under $600 a transaction, no red flags. It's not like they're audited." Luke froze the video. Rewound. Played it again. There it was, plainly said. No shame. No hesitation. He turned to his father. "Do you see this?" Mr. Franklin paused, then nodded slowly. "Document everything. Print it twice. Put one copy in your drawer, give one to me." Luke spent the next hour doing just that. He created a new folder labeled HOA Fraud Evidence, sorted every file by date, added notes, clipped screenshots, even included timestamps on the video. The once chaotic pile on the kitchen table now looked like the beginnings of a case. Outside, the street was quiet. Too quiet. A soft knock broke the stillness. Luke opened the door, but no one stood there. Only an envelope on the mat, this one bright red, no writing, sealed with a silver sticker shaped like a gavel. He picked it up, opened it, and found a single piece of paper inside. "Stop digging. Karen announces the annual Fall Harmony Festival, and declares HOA attendance mandatory." The flyers appeared overnight, fluttering from mailboxes and porch railings like leaves no one had asked for. Bold orange lettering over a background of cornucopias and wheat bundles proclaimed, "Clearwater Pines Fall Harmony Festival, attendance mandatory for all residents under HOA order." At the bottom, Karen's name was signed in looping cursive, followed by her favorite title, Chairwoman, Neighborhood Compliance Authority. Luke read the notice 3 times before handing it to his father. Mr. Franklin scanned it once and raised an eyebrow. "She's calling it a festival," Luke said, "but I'm guessing this is more parade than party." Mr. Franklin folded the paper neatly in half and tucked it into his clipboard. Saturday arrived with a chill in the air and a sky so blue it looked painted. The community park had been transformed. Strings of lights stretched from tree to tree, tables lined with cider pitchers and trays of pumpkin bars. Children wandered between vendor tents painted in HOA-approved fall colors. And near the center stood Karen, resplendent in a deep maroon pantsuit and holding a microphone like it was the scepter of a benevolent monarch. Behind her stood a booth labeled Compliance Station, complete with a folding table, laminated pledges, and a stack of printed community conduct tickets clipped neatly together. A banner above the booth read, "Pledge Loyalty, Pledge Order." "Welcome, neighbors." Karen's voice rang through the speaker system, slightly too loud for comfort. "It warms my heart to see so many of you here, united under the spirit of seasonal harmony and, of course, community responsibility." Luke stood near the cider table, hands in his pockets, watching. Marla leaned beside him, a cup of tea in hand. "Every time Karen throws an event," she muttered, "she uses it to punish someone." Across the park, Mr. Franklin moved with quiet precision. He stopped at small groups, spoke in low tones, handed out short papers clipped to half-folded manila cards. Nobody refused. A few read immediately. A few slipped them into purses or back pockets. Most just nodded, grateful for someone else to start the conversation. Karen gestured toward the compliance station. "This year, we ask all residents to affirm their dedication to harmony. Please stop by and sign your conduct pledge. It's just a formality," she added, in a tone that made it sound anything but. Luke moved among the booths, not saying much, but when someone met his eye, he gave a simple nod and, quietly, "Tomorrow. Stay tuned." The day wore on. Children carved small pumpkins. A bluegrass trio played near the pavilion. Karen made 3 rounds through the crowd, microphone in hand, smiling too hard and speaking just loud enough to remind everyone she was watching. She waved at Mr. Franklin. He didn't wave back. Luke sat on a bench near the edge of the crowd, scrolling through his phone. He'd set the HOA video as private, but that morning he'd received nearly a dozen messages asking for more. The thread had grown legs, neighbors sharing photos of flyers, citations, even a blurry shot of Karen's HOA debit card at the local hardware store. Then he heard her voice behind him. "I've already filed a second IRS report," she said, her tone honeyed with just enough venom. "This time with names. Plural." Luke didn't move. Just let the words hang in the air. Across the park, Mr. Franklin stood beneath a maple tree, clipboard open, pen poised over a final signature. He didn't look up when he spoke, but his voice carried easily. "Tomorrow, we file everything." The morning of the festival's closing ceremony, Mr. Franklin arrives early, in full county-issued attire. He stepped onto the field as the sun broke over the treetops, casting long amber shadows across the community park. Gone were the neutral slacks and folded button-downs. Today, Mr. Harold Franklin wore the pressed dark trousers and navy jacket of the County Oversight Division. The silver badge gleamed from his breast pocket. A clipboard rested neatly under his arm, and in his free hand, his usual ceramic mug, retired, but still watching. A few neighbors were already gathering, quietly unpacking chairs and warming up cider urns. They paused as he walked past. Some gave small nods. Others simply stepped aside. The stage had been dressed in artificial garlands and glittery signage for the final day of the Fall Harmony Festival. A lone microphone stood at center, waiting. Luke stood nearby at a folding table outfitted with a small laptop, a borrowed projector, and a modest portable speaker. "You good?" Mr. Franklin asked. Luke nodded. "Everything's cued." "Good." He sipped his coffee. "Let's keep it quiet until it's not." By 10 o'clock, the park buzzed with soft music and polite tension. Neighbors clustered in little groups, murmuring. Karen arrived just after, striding across the grass in a tailored blazer the color of pomegranates, clipboard tucked tightly against her ribs. Her hair was pinned, her smile set. "Good morning, everyone," she called into the mic, the feedback sharp for a moment. "It's wonderful to see such unity. It reminds us how powerful shared values can be." She walked the stage like a politician at a campaign rally, pausing for effect. "However," she said, flipping her clipboard, "we must address a troubling wave of non-compliance, unauthorized structures, improper signage, and digital dissent." Luke noticed a few heads turn. Karen's smile sharpened. It's time we re-establish our standards. As chairwoman, I am authorizing a temporary enforcement committee. Names have been noted. Escalation will begin this week. The crowd shifted uneasily. Then Mr. Franklin stepped forward. He didn't grab the mic. He simply walked up beside her, reached into his folder, and handed her a sheet of paper. She blinked, caught off guard, then leaned into the microphone. Mr. Franklin, we're in the middle of official HOA business. He turned to the crowd. His voice didn't need amplification. This is a certified notice from the county auditor's office, he said. It confirms that the Clearwater Pines Homeowners Association, as presented by Ms. Blakely, is not registered, incorporated, or legally authorized in any capacity. There is no board. No articles of governance. No recorded election. He held up the document. For 6 months, Ms. Blakely has collected over $4,700 under the guise of neighborhood dues. There is no budget. No public accounting. These actions constitute municipal fraud and impersonation of administrative authority. Karen sputtered, gripping her clipboard tighter. This is slander. Luke clicked the projector. The screen behind them lit up. A grainy video appeared, Karen in her garage, speaking candidly. All I have to do is collect, keep it under $600 a transaction, no red flags. It's not like they're audited. A hush fell. Luke turned up the volume. The clip played again. A few gasps echoed. Someone near the back swore softly. Karen tried to speak. This is edited. That's not. Mr. Franklin raised another page. This is a sworn affidavit. We've reviewed the source of each payment, including receipts tied to personal accounts. This isn't confusion. It's misconduct. A beat passed. Then someone clapped. It was soft, 2 beats, then 3. A second neighbor joined in. Then a third. Within moments, the sound spread like a ripple across the grass. Karen took a step back. Then another. The clipboard slipped slightly in her grip. She turned, looking for an exit. That's when the low hum of a county sheriff's cruiser rolled up behind the festival tent. The following morning, the HOA command center, Karen's shed, is found empty, doors swinging open in the breeze. It creaked with each gust, the paint-chipped door of the shed now hanging slightly off its hinges. A single plastic chair sat inside, tipped on its side. The HOA banner that had once proudly declared Command Center lay crumpled in the corner, half covered in leaves. No sign of the clipboard. No sign of Karen. Marla was the first to notice it. She passed by early that morning with a tray of impatiens and a small shovel tucked into the crook of her elbow. When she peeked inside the shed and saw the emptiness, she didn't speak, just nodded once and kept walking. By midday, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear, but the hush of exhale after a long-held breath. The community board had been cleared of the fake citations and laminated ordinances. In their place, a fresh notice had been pinned, county seal at the top, 3 names listed below as interim board members for the Provisional Clearwater Pines Neighborhood Committee. No grand titles. No chairwomen. Marla planted a few marigolds near the base of the sign. Across the street, Luke sat beside his father on the porch. A fresh mug of coffee warmed his hands. Mr. Franklin, in his usual seat, read the local paper with the same stillness that had unnerved and impressed half the town. "She's really gone?" Luke asked. His father didn't look up. "Gone enough." The porch creaked under the weight of comfort and something like closure. Luke looked out at the street, where neighbors passed each other with tentative waves. A few of them even lingered to chat, no longer worried about who might be taking notes. The petition had passed easily. With Karen's structure disbanded and the fraud reported, residents had voted to form a legitimate, transparent HOA. No fines without vote, no citations without procedure. Luke, to his surprise, had been asked to oversee digital communications and compliance records. He'd accepted, on one condition: all records had to be public. Mr. Franklin had been offered the chair position. He declined without hesitation. "I'll advise," he said, "but I'm not in the business of rules anymore. I'm in the business of peace." Luke now spent his mornings cataloging what few HOA documents remained. Most were nonsense. A few, curiously, seemed like they'd been meant to keep real order, though buried under glitter and ego. Every now and then, he wondered what Karen's original goal had been. Control, yes. But maybe also fear. Or loneliness. It was hard to know. That afternoon, as Luke emptied the mailbox, he found a single sheet of paper tucked in among the coupons. No stamp. No envelope. Just one sentence typed in small font. "She was seen near the old garden lot last night." There was no name. No indication of who had sent it. But the message sat heavy in his hand. He walked back toward the porch, glancing at the house across the street. Curtains hung half-drawn. Nothing moved. Until something did. A brief flicker, almost imagined, of pink fabric just behind the curtain edge. A flash of color, familiar as it was absurd, like the echo of a mistake not quite learned from. Luke stared. His father didn't. He simply took another sip from his mug, eyes still on the horizon. Let them try. The morning after the storm, Clearwater Pines found itself quieter, not with fear, but with the relief of sunlight after long shadows. Neighbors greeted each other without glancing over their shoulders, and the empty shed that once held fear now only creaked in the breeze. What began as one woman's grip on control ended with a community learning that silence was never the answer. When power is claimed without permission, it's truth, not anger, that brings it to its knees. Like an old porch light left on through the night, a steady voice can guide a neighborhood home.